Donald Trump did not have a great late night. He might have had an upset stomach last night after Fani Willis and a Georgia grand jury indicted him and 18 others for allegedly scheming to illegally overturn the 2020 election and stop the peaceful transition of power. The 98-page indictment lists the 41 charges against 19 defendants, from Trump to his former attorney, Rudy Giuliani, to former White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. Fulton County DA Fani Willis again laid it all out, and boy, was it a barn burner around midnight last night.
Every individual charged in the indictment is charged with one count of violating Georgia's Racketeer, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act through participation in a criminal enterprise in Fulton County, Georgia, and elsewhere to accomplish the illegal goal of allowing Donald J. Trump to seize the presidential term of office beginning on January 20th, 21. Specifically, the participants in association took various actions in Georgia and elsewhere to block the counting of the votes of the presidential electors who were certified as the winners of Georgia's 2020 general election. As you examine the indictment, you will see acts that are identified as overt acts and those that are identified as predicate acts, sometimes called acts of racketeering activity. Overt acts are not necessarily crimes under Georgia law in isolation, but are alleged to be acts taken in furtherance of the conspiracy. Many occurred in Georgia, and some occurred in other jurisdictions and are included because the grand jury believes they were part of the illegal effort to overturn the results of Georgia's 2020 presidential election. The acts identified as predicate acts or acts of racketeering activity are crimes that are alleged to have been committed in furtherance of the criminal enterprise. Acts of racketeering activity are also charged as separate counts in the indictment against those who are alleged to have committed them. All elections in our nation are administered by these states, which are given the responsibility of ensuring a fair process and an accurate counting of the votes. That includes elections for presidential electors, Congress, state officials, and local offices. The state's role in this process is essential to the functioning of our democracy. Georgia, like every state, has laws that allow those who believe that results of an election are wrong, whether because of intentional wrongdoing or unintentional error, to challenge those results in our state courts. The indictment alleges that rather than abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges, the defendants engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise to overturn Georgia's presidential election result. Subsequent to the indictment, as is the normal process in Georgia law, the grand jury issued arrest warrants for those who are charged. I am giving the defendants the opportunity to voluntarily surrender no later than noon on Friday, the 25th day of August, 2023. I remind everyone here that an indictment is only a series of allegations based on a grand jury's determination of probable cause to support the charges. It is now the duty of my office to prove these charges in the indictment beyond a reasonable doubt at trial.
And now keep in mind, in that same news conference, when she took questions, Fani Willis made it clear that, guess what? There are mandatory minimums in Georgia. If convicted, ain't no probation. Governor can't parole you. Michael Sozan, a senior fellow of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, joins me from D.C. Attorney Gerald Griggs, the Atlanta NAACP President, also here as well. Gerald, I want to go to you. Giuliani, Sidney Powell, a number of folks, but there are a couple of black folks who are also on this list. One of them, Black Voices for Trump, and then this Sister Trevion, who was a publicist. You'll see Trevion Cootie. She was a publicist for Kanye West as well as R. Kelly. She also indicted. She's been talking a lot of trash on her Instagram and Twitter pages. Bottom line is these folks better take this thing seriously. They could be facing prison time.
Absolutely. And, I was looking at the numbers as we were going through the indictment, and they're facing, including Donald Trump, about 76 years in prison. And we're dealing with a very serious prosecutor. And so they should take it very seriously. Fani Willis has handled RICO cases ever since she was an ADA, having Georgia's longest RICO trial, which is the Atlanta Public Schools cheating trial, which she was successful in. And she has the YSL case, and she's indicted a number of gang RICO conspiracies. So she's very seasoned and experienced, and she's very focused on this case. So people need to take it seriously. Ms. Willis has investigated for over 2 years in this case. And last night, a Fulton County grand jury returned indictments that speak to what happened. And it's a speaking indictment. You see the criminal enterprise, you see the predicate acts, you see the attempts to subvert the will of the people. And so I think she's very serious, and I think they should take it very serious as well.
It is beyond hilarious, Michael, to watch these Republicans lose their minds and go, Trump did nothing wrong.
Yep. Indeed, it is. And, they are starting to come up with potential defenses, either in this or the federal case, about how he was just exercising his First Amendment rights. But I think that the defenses they don't sound to be the strongest right now. We'll see what happens when they get into court. But ultimately, I think this case, again, sends a very strong signal that no one is above the law in this country, not even a former president. And it's courageous of Fani Willis to bring this case forward. And it's incredibly interesting to see that she's charging it as a RICO case at its heart. This is about election-related racketeering, a big criminal enterprise, usually used against the mob, although, of course, she and others have used it more broadly in recent years. Criminal enterprises come in all shapes and sizes, and this is alleged to be a criminal enterprise that was designed to allow Trump to thwart the peaceful transition of power in this country.
The thing, Gerald, that I find all to be interesting, again, Donald Trump, the constant attack on black people. He kept attacking 4 cities, Atlanta, Fulton County, Philadelphia, Detroit, and Milwaukee. And he's getting his comeuppance from black prosecutors. New York AG Tish James, Alvin Bragg, the DA in Manhattan, and now Fani Willis. And so it must be driving him and his crazy supporters out of their minds, because they kept attacking black people, and it's black people who are holding them accountable.
And as you know all the time, Roland, it's black people and minorities that continue to defend the democracy. And these lawyers are very serious about the rule of law. Many times there are people that say they're law and order. Well, no one's more law and order than a prosecutor, especially a serious prosecutor like Alvin Bragg or like Fani Willis or like Tish James. And so they are holding him accountable in a way that he's never been held accountable before. And what he failed to realize is all of those places you named that he was attacking, he said that people weren't voting. He said that there was all types of dead people voting and all those things. Those people heard him. And now they're speaking back in several languages that he doesn't understand. One, that's the ability to vote. But 2, that's the ability to hold individuals accountable who discount the voices of millions of African Americans who voted in 2020 and voted in overwhelming numbers. So he is getting his comeuppance, and I think that these strong African American prosecutors are standing for the rule of law and making sure justice, in fact, reverberates all over this country, and no one is above the law.
You had all sorts of different things in this indictment here that I found to be interesting, Michael, where, quote, just say that the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. I mean, Jesus. And for them to say, oh, no, he was just talking. No, they were literally plotting.
That's right. They had a multi-pronged plot to steal the election. That's what's been alleged. There seems to be a lot of evidence to back that up. They did it in various ways by trying to influence state legislators to throw out the results, to arrange for fake electors. Remember the whole pressure campaign on Vice President Mike Pence, which is mentioned as part of the scheme as well. And I want to mention two other people who I think were really always stick out in my mind, and that's Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. They're the election workers who had spent so many years working in Fulton County and in Georgia to help protect elections. They worked at the polls, they worked within the election system, dedicated public servants, and they had their lives trashed by Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump, and others who were part of this criminal enterprise. You'll remember that both of those women testified in front of the January 6th committee in Congress, incredibly powerful, emotional testimony, where they said that they had their lives threatened, their lives turned upside down. They were afraid to even leave their homes. And most recently, just a few weeks ago, Rudy Giuliani admitted in a court proceeding that he did lie about them when he and Donald Trump and others accused them of taking multiple steps to change the election results. Those two women always come back in my mind as people whose lives have been utterly affected by this sort of criminal scheme that Donald Trump and his team embarked on.
Gerald, one of the things that we've made clear, Fani Willis said that Trump and the others, they've got until noon Friday to turn themselves in. And the Fulton County Sheriff has made it clear, he said, unless someone else tells me otherwise, they're going to be handcuffed, mugshot, fingerprinted, just like anybody else who has been indicted in Fulton County.
Yes, and the sheriff has made it abundantly clear that he will follow the process that any criminal defendant goes through when they are processed after a grand jury indictment, which means that there are grand jury warrants that have already issued. So they've given them a dead-end turn-in date. If they don't turn themselves into the Fulton County Jail to be processed, that means fingerprinted, that means mugshot, that means that perp walk. They are going to see the fugitive squad come after them. And so I think people need to understand we have shifted from a political conversation into a legal conversation. And the law is quite clear on the process here in Georgia. Title 17 does not have an exception for anybody that's running for president or somebody that's a former president. It's for everyone. And Title 17 says you got to go through this process. The sheriff's saying you got to go through this process. So they will go through this process. And I think once they get inside the Fulton County Detention Center and they see that it's real in there and they are brought over to the jail courtroom and they have their first appearance where the magistrate judge will determine whether or not they get bond. And there's no guarantee in Georgia that you will actually get bond. And so they are going to experience something that we have not seen before. That is the wheels of justice turning the proper way, the consistent way, the way that they turn for everybody. And so, as a criminal defense attorney who's practiced in Fulton County, I can tell you that Fulton County is a serious jurisdiction with serious judges, a serious prosecutor, and serious jurors. And these individuals who are now charged with 41 counts, facing up to 76 years, need to start taking it serious. I would strongly advise they turn themselves in immediately so they can get on that morning calendar to see if they can get bond.
The thing that, was interesting here when you look at what took place late last night, Michael, you saw her, first of all, take her time, go through all the necessary steps, and then you see how this thing just kept going. And one of the things, this right here is at the front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution today. Trump 18 allies indicted in Georgia. That's the entire front page. Here's one of the things that I found to be interesting. Dan Abrams was on News Nation, and he made one of the dumbest comments in the world. He said that he felt that Fani Willis should have dropped her case since Jack Smith indicted Donald Trump for similar things. But she's the prosecutor of Fulton County. Her job is to enforce Georgia laws. And there are many other cases where look, we talk about Ahmaud Arbery. That were state charges and there were federal charges. And both things still went forward. So I'm just tired of people sitting here, frankly, giving Donald Trump privilege, if you will. Oh, because I don't care if he was in the Oval Office. The bottom line is no one is above the law. Treat him like you would treat anybody else.
Exactly. And that's true at the federal level or the state level, both. And I agree with you. You know, whether it's Van Abrams or others, there's starting to be this line of thought coming out from people. There's a well-known columnist at the Washington Post, Ruth Marcus, who just published on this in the last several hours with a title something like "The Georgia Indictment May Have Been One Indictment Too Many." And her thesis was something similar, that this should be handled perhaps at the federal level. Jack Smith is already handling it. This is a sprawling case. It's muddying the waters. But, certainly there's a very strong view that Willis has done the right thing here in Georgia, upholding Georgia law, using the Georgia RICO statutes. And I think that, clearly Georgia may have been the centerpiece of the schemes from Donald Trump and his allies and what they allegedly did. I mean, Donald Trump's call to Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, which most of us have heard by this point, is out there for everyone to hear and is very flagrant and is at the heart of the matter. And I think that sort of boldness and flagrant actions that were taken by Donald Trump and his team, I can see why a strong prosecutor like Fani Willis wants to be able to bring some measure of accountability here.
And Gerald, look, when you look at what's going on here, look, Judge Cannon is going to be holding a hearing on August 24th in the documents case. They must turn themselves in by June 25th. And then Judge Chunkin is going to be holding a hearing in D.C. August 28th. So Trump and his lawyers, hey, get that plane busy, because they're going to be hopping from city to city to city when it comes to all of these different indictments.
Yes, they're going to be very busy in the next few months. And the thing about all these cases is if Mr. Trump truly wants to defend himself and say that he's not guilty, he can file a demand for speedy trial. This case in Georgia could be tried in the next 4 months if he decides to file a demand for speedy trial. In Georgia, once you've been arraigned, if you file it within those 10 days, you can be on the next trial calendar, and it has to be tried within the term of court, which is 2 months, or the subsequent term of court, which is the next 2 months. So if he's interested in clearing his name, he can file that speedy trial demand and be in court. And to answer your other question about people like Dan Abrams and these others that are expounding on Georgia law, and they're not Georgia lawyers, know that they live in Georgia. Georgia is the type of place where we pride ourselves on justice. This is the birthplace of the civil rights movement. And it's important that voting rights are protected. It's important that any criminal behavior is prosecuted. And that's what Fani Willis is doing. And so she's standing up for the citizens of Georgia, whom she represents. And it's time for Donald Trump's lawyers to stand up for him in a courtroom and make cogent legal arguments. There's no argument that, because he's charged in federal court, you can't charge him in state court. They're separate sovereigns. This was state court activity. He called into Georgia and asked to find 11,790 votes. And so it's time for Georgia's voters and Georgia citizens to determine whether or not there was a violation of Georgia law.
Indeed. All right, lots more to discuss. Michael, Gerald, I certainly appreciate you joining us. Thanks a lot.